For over 3 centuries, the Philippines was under Spanish rule, but the full story of why they came, and more importantly, why they stayed for 333 years, is often glossed over in our history books. We are taught it was about God, gold, and glory. But what if the gold wasn't the treasure they were truly after? What if their mission wasn't just about faith? This is the story of how a small archipelago became the unexpected key to a global empire, and how understanding that truth eventually sparked a revolution. Let's travel back to the 16th century. The age of exploration is in full swing. European powers are racing to claim new lands and new trade routes. Spain, fresh off its conquests in the Americas, is rich with silver, but hungry for more. They've heard tales of the legendary Spice Islands in Asia, and Ferdinand Magellan set sail to find a westward route. He lands in the Philippines in 1521. But Magellan's journey ends there, and for the next 4 decades, Spain's attempts to establish a foothold fail. So, why did they keep trying? The common narrative points to the search for gold and the desire to convert natives to Christianity. And while those were factors, they weren't the main event. Let's look at the gold part first. Unlike the Aztec and Incan empires in the Americas, which were overflowing with precious metals, the Philippines didn't have vastly accessible gold mines. Early Spanish explorers were actually disappointed by the lack of immediate, massive wealth. So, if it wasn't for gold, what made the Philippines so valuable that Spain would spend decades and vast resources to finally conquer it in 1565 under Miguel Lopez de Legazpi? The answer lies not within the islands, but in their location. Look at a map. The Philippines sits at a strategic crossroads of Asia. To the north, the colossal empire of China. To the west, the vibrant markets of Southeast Asia. And to the east, across the vast Pacific, Spain's silver-rich colonies and the Americas. The Spanish realized that controlling the Philippines, specifically the port of Manila, meant they could control the flow of goods between Asia and the Americas. The real prize wasn't Filipino gold. It was Chinese silk, porcelain, and spices. And so began one of the most significant and long-lasting trade routes in history, the Manila galleon trade. For 250 years, massive Spanish galleons would sail from Acapulco, Mexico, loaded with silver mined from the Americas. This silver was the only thing the Chinese market truly desired from the West. In Manila, Chinese merchants, known as Sanglis, would eagerly trade their exquisite silks, delicate porcelain, and other luxury goods for that silver. The galleons would then be reloaded with these Asian treasures and make the treacherous journey back across the Pacific to Mexico, where the goods were then transported overland and shipped to Spain. Manila wasn't just a colonial outpost. It became the central hub of this global exchange, a vibrant, cosmopolitan city where cultures and commerce collided. It was Spain's economic lifeline. The profits from this trade were astronomical. The Spanish crown took a significant cut, funding its European wars and propping up its sprawling empire. For the Spanish colonists in Manila, it was a get-rich-quick scheme. The Philippines had become indispensable. Losing it would mean losing their direct access to the lucrative markets of Asia. This trade route was the real reason they stayed. But how do you control a population of millions with just a few thousand Spaniards? You can't do it with swords alone. This is where the second part of the colonial motto, God, comes into play, but not in the way we often think. Religion wasn't just a mission, it was a mechanism of control. While the soldiers secured the territory, it was the friars who truly conquered the islands. Spanish friars, from orders like the Augustinians, Franciscans, and Dominicans, spread throughout the archipelago. They learned the local languages, established churches in the heart of every town, and slowly integrated themselves into the fabric of Filipino life. The church became the center of the community. The friars were not just spiritual guides. They were the de facto government in many areas. They managed education, recorded births and deaths, and even oversaw local justice. By controlling education, they controlled what Filipinos learned. A curriculum centered on Catholic doctrine that emphasized obedience and by controlling the sacraments, they held immense psychological power over the populace. The fear of damnation was a more effective deterrent than a Spanish musket. Furthermore, the religious orders amassed immense wealth and power through donations, purchases, and land grabbing. They became the largest landowners in the colony. They controlled vast estates, or haciendas, where Filipinos were often forced to work as tenants, paying exorbitant rents. This economic power, combined with their spiritual authority, made the friars an incredibly powerful and often untouchable force. Any resistance against the colonial government was framed as a sin against God. Religion was the tool that pacified the islands, making them easier and cheaper to govern. It was the software of colonial rule, installed in the minds of the people. For centuries, this system worked. While Spain profited from the galleon trade and the friars consolidated their power, the Filipino people bore the true cost. They were subjected to forced labor, or polo, the servicios where men were compelled to build churches, cut timber for ships, and construct government buildings, often for little to no pay. They were burdened with heavy taxes, or tributo, to support the colonial administration and the church. Their ancestral lands were taken, and their local cultures and traditions were suppressed. The Philippines wasn't being nurtured as a part of the Spanish kingdom. It was being exploited as a resource. It was an occupation for profit, maintained through a sophisticated system of psychological and economic control disguised as a holy mission. Spain didn't stay in the Philippines because they needed to civilize it. They stayed because they couldn't afford to lose their gateway to Asian wealth. But you can only suppress a people for so long. Over the centuries, resentments, small, scattered revolts broke out, but they were often easily crushed. The game changed in the 19th century. The opening of the Suez Canal cut travel time to Europe, allowing a new class of educated Filipinos, the ilustrados, to travel and absorb the liberal ideas of the West, ideas of liberty, equality, and nationhood. Men like José Rizal, through his novels, exposed the cancer of society, the abuses of the friars, and the injustices of the colonial system. He didn't initially call for independence, but for reform. He and others revealed the truth, that the colony's purpose was not salvation, but they showed that the power of the colonizers was not divine, but man-made, and therefore could be unmade. When Filipinos began to understand that they were not just subjects of a king, but cogs in a global economic machine, the desire for mere reform transformed into a demand for revolution. The realization that they were being occupied for profit, not for faith, was the spark that ignited the Philippine Revolution of 1896. Once the true nature of their bondage was clear, independence became inevitable. The story of Spanish colonization is far more complex than just a quest for God, gold, and glory. It's a story of global economics, of strategic power, and the use of religion as a powerful tool of control. It is a history that reminds us to always look beyond the official narrative and ask the crucial question: who truly benefits? Thanks for watching. This is the history they didn't teach you in school. If you want to uncover more hidden stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And let us know in the comments what piece of history you think we should explore next. See you in the next video.